Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 25 mini-series with the New York Yankees. And we are just about at the midway point of the 2026 season, made it to July 1st, and the Yankees are having a solid year. Fourth in the American League in runs scored, sixth in the American League in runs against. 44 and 35 record, 3 games behind the Rays in the division. We are 2.5 up on the Rangers, Red Sox, and White Sox, who are all competing for the final 2 wildcard spots in the American League. So if the season were to end today, we would be in the playoffs. That said, we have not been playing as well of late. Had an excellent April and May. Our month of June, unfortunately, was 4 games below 500. So we're looking to turn things around, and our starting pitching has been a bit disappointing. Can see everyone in the rotation, his ERAs between 4 and 5.5, with the amount of money we have invested and the alleged quality of the pitchers in the rotation. Would think that we should be doing better than that, and hopefully things will get better over the second half of the season. We talked when we did our mid-season review at the end of the last episode that helping the bullpen was probably the number one need that we had. And given that we're still a month away from the trade deadline, the players who were on the trade block weren't necessarily incredibly high quality yet. So we looked and searched for players who were not on the trade block, who would be more impactful, and not surprisingly, the prices for the players that could really make an impact were not something that we could afford, and in some cases just not even realistic mathematically for the Yankees to do. So we did end up just making a trade for a player who I felt was the best fit for us on the trade block. It is a pure rental. Player is in the final year of his contract. We're going to slot him into the bullpen for the time being, but certainly a player who I think could help in the rotation down the line if the bottom end of our rotation remains ineffective and or we have some injuries. And that's Jesus Luzardo from San Francisco. They are one of the worst teams in baseball. As I mentioned, he's in the final year of his contract. So they weren't looking for an exorbitant sum for him. Good fastball plus slider and changeup, plenty of stamina to start. He's been mostly out of the bullpen for them this year. And as I said, that's where we intend to use him right now, thinking that he can certainly strengthen our bullpen. But there's certainly a possibility that he ends up in our rotation at some point, particularly if he's effective. He's a left-handed pitcher who should benefit in Yankee Stadium. Does have fly ball tendencies and is kind of only average at keeping the ball in the park with the movement he has on his pitches. But over the course of his career, Luzardo has definitely been a bit above average pitcher, and he's been even better the last couple years in San Francisco, so we think he's probably kind of peaking at this point. We gave up a lot of minor league depth just to get them to retain his contract to give us more flexibility going forward since we are in win now mode. The key asset that we gave up was 21-year-old minor league third baseman George Lombard Jr. Looks like he could be a respectable fielder. The question is how much his bat is going to develop. He's 21 years old, hasn't gotten out of rookie ball with us. A few other marginal prospects included, as well as a couple veterans as well, but nothing that was too material. So felt like that was a good trade for us. And as we get closer to the trade deadline, get through the All-Star break, get through the amateur draft, hopefully some teams fall out of contention, we still have a little over $6 million to add some reinforcements if there's more interesting players available down the line. And we've made it to the first-year player draft, and we're slipping back a little bit, 5.5 behind the Rays in the division and only half a game up on the Orioles and the Red Sox for the final wild card spot in the American League. So definitely need to turn things up a notch going forward. Aaron Judge having a monster season. He's been relatively healthy this year. Playing him as DH against right-handed pitching, but still trying to play him in the field against left-handed pitching. Also probably benefits a bit from that successful strength and conditioning program we put him through last offseason, but leading the league in homers, ribbies, and OPS. And Juan Soto is right behind him in OPS, has 23 homers and 61 ribbies himself while hitting over 300. Those guys both over 1,000 in their OPS at this point. So looking at potentially historic seasons for the middle of the Yankees lineup this year. But as always, particularly with Judge, the key is going to be his health going forward. And after being a bit disappointing last year, first team out of the playoffs in the American League, the Yankees will be picking 18th this year. Taking a look at the draft pool, it's certainly not overwhelmingly filled with quality, but it is definitely better than last year's draft pool, which was historically nasty and weak. So there should be a pretty interesting option for us at number 18 overall. And there are a handful of batters and pitchers that are more highly regarded this year, which is positive. We're just going to touch on the starting pitching prospects. I've looked at the relievers. Some of them are interesting, but not someone that we would likely take in the first round, 18th overall. Sergio Morales, 18-year-old out of Hawaii. Potential 3 to 4 pitch arsenal, 4 pitches that could all be above average if that change develops. Love the personality with the high leadership, adaptability, work ethic, and loyalty. Doesn't throw that hard, barely topping 90, but has good stamina, pretty good at holding on runners. Think his stuff, movement, and his control could all be average or above average when all is said and done. Is looking for a lot of money, $9.5 million. Hope there will be someone we like more than Morales, but he's not a horrible option at number 18. Dan Adkins has the same kind of upside, according to our scout. Another guy who's almost 19 years old, looking for $7.5 million. Throws a little harder in the low 90s. Another guy who, if his change develops, could be a 4-pitch guy. His pitch is not quite as high end, but plus movement and potentially plus control. Also, not a bad prospect. Doesn't have some of the same really positive personality traits that we saw with Morales. And then Darryl Stelzer is the highest regarded pitching prospect according to our scout. Do like the durability, not looking for crazy money, has enough stamina, good at holding on runners. Low adaptability. Only a 3-pitch guy, though. So if that change doesn't develop, he's probably a high-volume, high-end reliever. Could potentially have plus stuff, plus control, average movement, throws in the low 90s. None of these guys are horrible prospects, but none of them really jump off the page to me either as the one that I would have to have. So I'm kind of hoping when we pivot over to the batters that someone's interesting, and there are a handful of batters with 3.5-star or higher potential. I'm looking offline at other things than just the star ratings. I've got obviously the batting potential and pitching potential that I look at, but for purposes of doing things relatively quickly here, we'll highlight the top prospects. Center fielder Mike Sands, pretty well-balanced player, another guy who's looking for more money than slot at this point, but could be average or above average at just about everything offensively. Solid outfield range, respectable speed, but not blistering speed by any stretch of the imagination. Steve Nolte, a right fielder, a little more interesting to me. The bat is potentially a little higher end, does have the high work ethic, certainly a competent corner outfielder. Looks like he could also potentially play first base. Similar in that he's not horribly slow, but also certainly not fast. Looking for a little more money, but just because he's higher end, I think I probably prefer him over Mr. Sands. Lucero Estrella, another outfielder. Not as good defensively, not as much speed as the other two. Looking for more money. Does potentially have the most power of any of them, and high work ethic and high intelligence. Moving on to the only 4-star prospect left fielder Tim Canchola. Looking for $6.5 million. Not much going on defensively. He is 6'2", but with those first base ratings, he's probably really a left fielder or DH. But potentially a really good contact hitter with decent power as well. Switch hitter. Not an uninteresting prospect. And the highest rated prospect available is a catcher, Zach Ash. Really nice bat for a catcher, plus contact, plus power. Competent defensively, certainly not as good a catcher as I'd like, but we do have a big investment in player development. We do have great coaches throughout our minor league system now, and there's also the player development lab, so I feel like we could probably turn him into a more than competent defensive catcher. Not looking for a ton of money. He could be a left fielder at 6'2". He could be a first baseman. So there's a few options with him other than catcher, and given the bat that he has, he's not an uninteresting prospect. Don't love the low leadership, but with that being the only negative personality trait, it's certainly not a complete deal breaker. Scouting director recommends we go with Zach Ash. Not surprisingly, he thinks that he's got the highest potential of anybody out there. If we were going to look at a pitcher, not surprisingly, Darryl Stelzer, as he's got the highest potential, according to our scout, of any pitcher out there as well. And we're going to go with the chalk and pick the catcher, Zach Ash. Definitely not a position of need in our organization, as we've got the excellent young catcher Helmut Bernstein that we picked in international amateur free agency about a year and a half ago, or more accurately signed in international amateur free agency. But I think that Ash has one of the more interesting bats available in this draft, and the fact that he can also potentially play catcher, and if not, pivot to first or left field, makes him a prospect that we think has some value. At the very least, it allows us to potentially use Bernstein or Ash down the line as a trade chip if these two really end up being two of the more valuable prospects in baseball. We're ultimately not going to need two great catchers, and if they have a lot of value, they could help us down the line with a trade that maybe puts us over the end if we're still in win-now mode going forward. So we are going to go with our scouting director's recommendation, and we're going to meet his very reasonable bonus demand of $1.4 million. Second round, our scout is recommending another catcher, Dan Bundridge. We're not going to go with another catcher here. That would be a bit of overkill. We're going to go with Trent Mabin, right fielder. Could have pretty interesting power, some ability to draw some walks. He's decent defensively. He's got a little bit of speed. We were tempted by the highest rated pitcher who's still out there, but that's really because everyone's looking at Darryl Stelzer as a potential reliever. I like the durability and the stamina of Stelzer, but if that change doesn't develop, he's a reliever, and I don't know that he's a closer. I think he's a good arm out of the bullpen. Only throwing in the low 90s. He's closing in on 19 years old. If Stelzer somehow lasts to the next round, he'd be an obvious pick to me. But I am right now a little more intrigued by the potential for Trent Mabin to be a pretty good all-around outfielder. So we are going to go with Mabin here in the second round. Move on to our next pick. And the highest rated starting pitcher is gone now, so we'll have to do a little more research to hopefully find someone who, if we do go with a starting pitcher, that we think can actually start for us down the line. And we are going to go with a starting pitching prospect here in the third round. Our scout recommends, if we take anybody, that we take Layman Walker. who's an interesting prospect. I think his stuff could be off the charts. Average movement, average-ish control, maybe a little bit better than average. Does have potentially a six-pitch arsenal, but throwing out that sinker most likely. It's a three-pitch arsenal, and then we're dependent on the change in the curve developing, likely to get him to 4 or 5 pitches. Not looking for a ton of money, decent stamina, decent at holding on runners. Only barely touches 90 right now, but he is a left-handed pitcher who would probably be reasonably successful in Yankee Stadium if he fully developed. The other option is Billy Dalton, another guy who has potentially excellent stuff, average movement, average control, not looking for crazy money. He's not 18 years old yet. He throws a little harder than Lehman. Only a three-pitch arsenal. I know that from comments, some of you really don't like those three-pitch starters. I've had reasonably good success with them over the years, particularly when it's three well above average pitches that we think Dalton could have. I don't have an extremely strong opinion among the two. I tend to think viewers may side with Lehman Walker just because that is a potentially very interesting 5-pitch arsenal if everything develops. The thing that concerns me about him is that the changeup and the curveball are two of his best 3 pitches, and if those don't develop, he's got a slightly above average splitter if it does develop, and then a kind of average fastball and slider. And as I noted, I'm kind of more willing to go with a 3-pitch starter if all 3 of the pitches are pretty good. And it does look like we could have above average fastball and cutter and a world-class sinker if everything goes according to plan with Mr. Dalton. So we're going to go with Dalton. No, it may not be the most popular pick in the world, but that's what makes markets. And we've completed the draft by going so far under slot with what Ash was looking for. That allowed us to take Maben and Dalton, who both ended up looking for more than slot, along with our 5th-round pick, Connor Langdon. So financially, this all worked. We'll see if we can get these players all into rookie ball, although with the new scheduling, the season is just about over at this point, but still good to get them into our organization and maybe think about someone like Ash or Maven perhaps to have a special program at the development lab over the upcoming off season. And with our focus on the future in the draft now complete, definitely time to turn towards the present, see what this team can do over the next several days before the All-Star break, and then really engage with the trade market and figure out if there's some way to fill whatever holes we feel we've got on this squad. And as the team continues to struggle, the players are starting to moan and whine. Tommy Edman, who we had signed to a minor league contract with a major league option, paying him $3 million this year, unhappy with his playing time. He's got 183 at-bats here through 91 games, so he's on pace to play almost as often as he did a year in Minnesota for a guy who was signed to a minor league contract and is putting up a 77 WRC plus thus far this season with a 235 average. I don't really know where he's got a lot to complain about, but if his attitude remains problematic, he could be someone that we ship out in the coming weeks if we find a better alternative. I mean, he's allegedly supposed to be smart. He went to Stanford. You would think when you're hitting 235, you just shut up and be happy that you've got a major league job. But with a week to go until the All-Star break, it's definitely been a rough month of July for us, just a 4-8 record. We got 6 games now between the All-Star break, all at home against Milwaukee and Boston, so we'll get to regroup then and see what this team looks like. But certainly the way we've been playing over the last 5 or 6 weeks is a bit disappointing, and we can't really blame it on injuries too much. Dalton Varsho's been banged up this year, still out for another 2 to 3 weeks. But other than him, everyone who we would want to have on the 26-man roster is healthy and well right now. And of course, as I'm talking about our health, that means I jinxed us because Everson Pereira, our good young center fielder, he's really more of a corner outfielder, but he's our center fielder. When Varsho is hurt, is now banged up with a herniated disc in his back. Given that we've got the All-Star break coming, we're just going to place him right on the 10-day IL. Basically, he should be ready to come back right about when we get through the All-Star break. So going to have to piece together center field for the next 4 games before the All-Star break. Not going to have great defense out there, but I think we've been pretty conservative with Judge thus far this year. He's still having a monster offensive season. The batting average has dipped to 291, but still has 34 homers, 81 ribbies, and a 177 WRC plus, while playing primarily designated hitter. Playing him in right a couple days a week against left-handed pitching just to give Soto a break as well. But he's been relatively healthy thus far, despite his health limitations. So we're going to go with perhaps a less than optimal option in center field for these next 4 games. We have won the first 2 against Milwaukee, so if we can win, I'd love to win 3 of these last 4. Take the series against Boston as well as the series against Milwaukee, but with no center fielder, if we're able to go 2-2 in these last 4 games before the All-Star break, it's probably not the end of the world. And we're going to give Tommy Edman a chance to play center field the next few days. He was complaining about not getting the playing time. He's not exactly a great defensive center fielder, but I think he's the best option we have, given that we're not going to put Judge out there and put his health at further risk. So we'll see what Edman can do in center field for the next 4 games and see if starting a few games has him feeling better about his role on the team and maybe teaches him a little humility perhaps. And we ended up sweeping Milwaukee, and we've taken one of the first 2 against Boston. Certainly want to win the final game here, which would make us feel a little better about the team with 2 straight series wins and a 5-1 record heading into the All-Star break. Also, obviously, always good to beat Boston, a team that we are in a battle for the playoffs with in the American League right now. A little bit of bad news. Garrett Cole, mild shoulder inflammation, going to be out 1 to 2 weeks. Moderate impact on his throwing. I guess he doesn't have to be out, but we are going to be pretty cautious with Cole. 7-7 this year with a 4.96 ERA, so he hasn't been pitching as well of late. Putting him on the IL will also give us an opportunity to see what Luzardo can do in the rotation. He hasn't been good in the very small sample size of just 9 1/3 innings since he joined the Yankees. Been involved in a lot of decisions for a setup guy. 1-2 record with a hold in just 7 games pitched. But as I mentioned, it's conceivable that he could end up being a member of this rotation at some point if things don't go well. And you look at these ERAs, which are now all between 4.5 and 5.5 among our starting pitchers. And certainly if Luzardo can provide a spark to the rotation, that would be very helpful. Still may end up over the next week and a half or so looking for some help on the trade market as well. And we did end up taking 2 out of 3 against Boston at home as well. So feeling a little better about where we stand as we head into the All-Star break, but still looks like it's going to be an excellent battle here in the American League East. We're 3.5 behind the Rays now. We're 2.5 up on both the Orioles and the Red Sox for second in the AL East, and also for the final wild card spot where those 2 teams are battling it out with the Mariners right now. As we hit the All-Star break, Judge leading the league in homers and ribbies still, as well as OPS. He's 3rd in batter WAR. Soto 2nd in OPS, 24 homers and 64 ribbies, so he's just off the top 3 leaderboard in those categories. Taking a look at our overall team statistics. Still fourth in runs scored, although we're tied for fourth at this point. Eighth in runs allowed, and the starters' ERA has ballooned to 11th, which is definitely disappointing given the number of resources we have invested there. With the 5-1 finish to the pre-All-Star break period, we've got our record up to July to 500, but our 53-44 record is a bit above Pythagorean expectations now. So the pitching is still definitely a concern. You can see we're really good against left-handed pitching, but we're barely above 500 against right-handed starting pitching. I think part of that is the fact that Varsho has been hurt so much. We expected him to be a useful left-handed bat for us with a little bit of pop, and he does have 12 homers and 26 ribbies and 180 at-bats. Only hitting .222 and basically a league average offensive player, but we did expect some pop from him, which he has largely provided. Because outside of Varsho, Austin Wells hitting .228 with 15 homers, so a pretty similar offensive performance there. And Christopher Familia, who's hitting .239 and 209 at-bats, are our only other lefties on the team, with the exception, of course, of the great Juan Soto. So hopefully Varsho getting back helps our offense against right-handed pitching. But if there's an opportunity to pick up a good left-handed hitter who can help us somewhere in the lineup, probably not the worst thing in the world for us to think about. Take a look at the All-Star Game rosters, and not surprisingly, no Yankees pitchers on the All-Star team. Looking at the rest of the All-Star team, though, also not surprising that both Aaron Judge and Juan Soto are named to the All-Star team this year with the incredible seasons they're having. And they are the only two Yankee All-Stars here in 2026. And of course, as we're getting ready for the All-Star break, we've got an injured diagnosis pending with Aaron Judge, a leg injury of some sort that was suffered yesterday. Hopefully going to not be too significant, because with 37 homers and 90 ribbies at the All-Star break, along with a .301 average, he is potentially going to have one of the great seasons of his career, which is saying something. But if he ends up on the IL for an extended period of time, clearly that won't be the case. And all things considered, the diagnosis could have been much worse for Judge. Day-to-day with a bruised thigh for about a week. Minimal impact on hitting, moderate impact on running. When we do get back from the All-Star break, we'll be very conservative with him, but probably don't need to put him on the IL. And we're feeling good about things coming out of the All-Star break. Just won our first two games on the road at the Angels, a 12-6 win in 12 innings. That's something you don't see all that often. So one game left at the Los Angeles Angels, and then 3 in Washington before we get to the trade deadline. We've had Judge on the bench. Probably will continue that. Only got 2 days left, so there's really only one game left with the off day for travel. So we are going to give Judge another couple days off to keep him healthy. Part of the reason we'll be able to do that is that Pereira is ready to come back off of the IL. So we'll send Kyle Lewis down to AAA if we can. He's a guy who we signed as a minor league free agent to kind of bolster our depth. You can see he did a good job in Scranton, and he did a good job in 13 at-bats. I'm guessing he may refuse the assignment. Yeah, he needs to clear waivers, obviously. So we're going to waive and DFA him. I'm guessing that even if he doesn't get picked up, he may not accept the assignment to AAA, but we'll at least give it a try. So as we prepare for the trade deadline, we're only a game and a half behind in the East at this point. We've won 4 in a row. The Rays have lost 5 in a row, so that has let us really close the gap there. We're still 2.5 up on the final wild card spot, which is the Red Sox, so certainly don't feel as if a playoff berth is guaranteed at this point. We do have a little bit of money, almost $6 million, to bring on some help. So we're going to certainly investigate what's available on the trade market. A left-handed bat that could help, and or a big-time pitcher, whether starter or reliever, would probably be the two primary areas that we're going to be investigating. And there's several interesting potential relievers on the market. We've kind of honed in on Ryan Helsey, Keegan Aiken, and Adbert Elzaleh. Price on all of them is higher than we're willing to pay right now. And granted, we're only a few days away from the trade deadline, but given the number of pitchers that are out there right now, we're probably going to be patient, see what happens over the next couple of days. Our old buddy Clay Holmes is out there as well. So there's definitely a lot of relievers that could strengthen our bullpen. I don't know that there's an impact starter. Sandy Alcantara still out there, but he was on the market before, and we kind of preferred Luzardo to him at this point. Batting wise, not really a true impact player in my mind on the trade block. We could reunite with Michael Conforto, which would be kind of weird. He's probably one of the better left-handed hitters available. We could reunite with Kevin Biggio, who was in the minors with us on a minor league contract a year ago, but I just don't see either of those moves being the type of left-handed hitter that we would really need. Reunite with Trent Grisham would certainly help the defense, but not going to be that impactful offensively. So I don't know that there's an obvious move for us to make here, but we're going to continue to try to work some deals and to see what the market looks like over the next couple of days as we get closer to the trade deadline. But right now, the price for the relievers is just too high, and I don't know that the left-handed hitters who are available are going to be impactful enough for us to give up much of anything for them. And we've gotten a couple trade offers. The Guardians are offering us James Karsonjak, who has incredible stuff. I'm sure some of you noticed him on the trade block that we looked at. I just don't love the low control. Clearly, he's been a very effective major league pitcher these last 3 mythical seasons that we played, but he does walk a lot of batters for a reliever, which is not necessarily what I want to see from someone who's going to be coming in high pressure situations, but it's not impossible. Nick Madrigal hitting .287 for us in 87 at-bats has been a useful utility infielder for us. I don't think I would hold up on making the trade because of him. But we've got some options out there because the Mets are also offering us Raisel Iglesias. And we only have to give minor league first baseman Bo Brewer in return. Iglesias definitely could help our bullpen. He's not going to be a closer for us, but he's been a well above average major league pitcher over the course of his career. The concern is that he's got a vesting option for $13 million next year if he finishes 40 games. So we're going to have to check how many games he's finished already. I don't anticipate him finishing too many with us, but he has been the closer for the Cardinals, and he's got 23 saves, so he's probably finished a fair amount of games for them already. Oh, and those of you who were looking at this closely would realize that the trade offer is already expired because it was the Mets who offered it to us yesterday, and he's with St. Louis now, so they've already traded him away. I actually don't feel bad about missing out on it because when I was looking at the pitching stats, he's already finished 34 games this year, so it's very conceivable that even if we weren't using him as the closer, he could be the last pitcher in 6 games for us the rest of the way. And I really did not want that option to kick in. So we're going to continue simming ahead. We beat the Angels. We've got a day off tomorrow and then 3 games against Washington. So probably play another game or 2 and then revisit the market, figure if there's anything for us to do here before the trade deadline. And we continue to get banged up here and there. Gleyber Torres, bruised ribs, going to have a minimal impact on hitting and running for 4 days. And then more material just because of our lack of our starting center fielder, Everson Pereira, back from the IL, and now back stiffness, which is going to impact him for another week. May see Edman getting a little more time at center field the next few days. It looks like Varsho's only 3 days away at this point from getting back. So going to be a lot going on these next few days. We did lose the first game of the series in Washington. So as we sit here on July 29th, we're half a game behind the Rays and in the AL East, and we are 3 up on the final wild card spot in the American League. And being a little bit patient with the pitching seems to have paid off. The Cardinals have actually made us an offer to send us Ryan Helsley, who is one of the relievers we were really interested in. The issue is that they're not going to take on any of his contract. They do want the right fielder, Brandon Maea, who's a solid young prospect, but not a premium prospect, as well as Madrigal, who, as we mentioned, has done a nice job for us as a utility player this year, but is not unexpendable. They'll also send us Caden Wallace, a third baseman, 24 years old. Not a bad player. Still has an option year left. But I almost, with the situation that we're in, would prefer that they don't include Wallace and take on some of Helsley's contract to give us a little more flexibility to maybe add a left-handed bat as well. I don't know that it's all going to work. It looks like Conforto is available at a pretty reasonable price, but he's also making mid-teens millions. So we're going to have these teams keeping pretty good chunks of these salaries for us to be able to really make this work the way that we'd like it to. And we are reunited with Michael Conforto, which I think is a little bit surprising given that we traded him away just about this time a year ago. But they kept his whole contract, sent us back some cash, and we just had to send Anthony Hall, a respectable left-handed hitting outfield prospect, but he's someone who's only made it to Double-A in our organization. Very productive there this year, with 33 homers, 71 ribbies, and a 137 WRC+. But at 25 years old, don't see him being a big part of our future. Conforto only hitting a .190 with Arizona this year. As I mentioned, it was about a year ago that we traded him to the Diamondbacks. Hasn't been particularly productive there, but looking at his profile, particularly against right-handed pitching, and think that he could probably be a little bit of an upgrade to the likes of what we've gotten from Wells and Familia. Maybe not quite the same power as those two, but overall I think he could hit for a better average if we're only playing him against right-handed pitching. Not a big part of our future. He's got that team option that we gave him 2 years ago for $13 million next year, which will certainly be declining. But feel like he's a left-handed bat that might help us a little bit against right-handed pitching coming off the bench. Clearly, Varsho's return is going to be the big lever that we have to press as far as hopefully more production against right-handed pitching and also better defense in center field. But the nice thing about them keeping the entire contract and sending us some money in return for the prospect is that we now can potentially think about this trade with the Cardinals, because I had looked into them keeping some of Helsley's contract and it just wasn't going to work. But now we do have the money to take on that entire contract. And with Madrigal being included in it, that opens up a roster spot for Conforto. Not that it's a perfect change, because Madrigal is a versatile, solid infielder, while Conforto is kind of an average defensive corner outfielder, first baseman type. But it does at least open up the roster spot. And we still have Cabrera down in AAA, who could fill that kind of second utility infielder role that Madrigal was filling for us. We will have to give up Maia, who is a decent prospect, as I said. Not a great prospect, but a very good fielder, a lot of speed. The question is just his bat. Hit only .218 in A-ball this year for us so far. So I don't see him being a huge part of our future. And Helsley, not a huge part of our future either, but certainly a guy who could help us this year in the bullpen. Over the course of his career, he's got a 136 ERA plus and an 81 FIP minus. So certainly expect that he would be another good arm for our bullpen. Also throws in triple digits from time to time. And from investigating things somewhat weirdly, when we take Caden Wallace out of the trade, it makes them not want to do it. So I don't know if he's got a huge future with us, but he's a decent defensive third baseman who can play a lot of infield positions. And he's not a horrible bat on paper. He doesn't have a ton of major league experience at this point. .231 average over 104 at-bats, 67 WRC plus. Certainly not great, but it's almost a replacement for Madrigal, quite honestly, which makes me feel even a little better about this trade. So we are just going to go ahead and complete the deal. So we've got a lot going on. People unhappy that Madrigal left. But we've added another big-time arm for our bullpen. So with the addition of Luzardo right at the start of this episode, as well as Helsley, plus Conforto, haven't made any real long-term commitments, and I don't feel like we've given away anyone who is going to be a big part of our potential future. And feeling like the team is a little better positioned today to hopefully compete for the playoff spot that we're pursuing than it previously was. So we're going to get to see Luzardo's first game in the rotation today against Washington, which will be good. You can see Helsley is going to slot in as our eighth inning setup man right ahead of Bednar. Matan still in a setup role, but lets the likes of Nardi move into a middle relief role. And Carlos Rodriguez kind of drops down into a long relief role. So feel like we've improved our bullpen a bit on the margin, and I particularly like Bednar, Helsley, and Matan is our guys to hopefully pitch the 7th, 8th, and 9th innings of close games. Wouldn't mind if one of them was a lefty, but Nardi's been pretty effective for us this year, and still think that he'll be useful coming on to get an out here and there when we're facing a tough lefty in the later innings of the games. And we've made it past the trade deadline and into August. We split those last 2 games of the month with Washington. As you saw on the first screen, which for some reason I moved away from, Varsho healthy now, Cole healthy now, although Cole still has 3 days left on the IL. Glaber and Pereira still banged up, but doesn't look like those injuries are going to end up being too significant. So we are potentially at full health within the first couple days of August, which, given where we are in the standings right now and the trades that we've made that think will help us on the margins, is not a horrible situation. Just a half game behind the Rays here on August 1st in the division. And we are 3 up on the Orioles and the Astros for those final 2 wild card spots in the American League. So put ourselves in position, I think, with the additions of Helsley and Luzardo and Conforto to be a little better than we were before we made those trades. Don't think any of them are monumental, but we also didn't pay monumental prices. We did at least bounce back from that losing record in June with a 13-11 July, so back above 500 for the month. Third in the National League, or in the American League in runs scored, eighth in the American League in runs allowed. Starters ERA is 13th now. Still feel like we've got more talent than that. Certainly we have more names than that with Snell, Rodon, Canning, Giolito, Luzardo, and Cole coming back soon. You look at their rankings, though, and they're not, at this point in their careers, considered incredible starting pitchers anymore. But certainly would think that this pitching staff, the rotation in particular, is better than the 13th best set of starters in the American League. And hopefully we will prove that over the final 2 months of the season. And we'll find out if we can guide this Yankees team into the playoffs in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.